It feels like Oscar season is finally in play once again. So many movies coming out that just absolutely pique my interest, with auteur filmmakers coming in with their big heavy hitters. And I got to see one of the potential Netflix Oscar contenders for this year with Kathryn Bigelow's return to filmmaking with A House of Dynamite. So let's get into it. Firstly, it's just so great to see Kathryn Bigelow behind the camera again making another film. She's most commonly known for films like Point Break, Zero Dark 30, and The Hurt Locker, which won Best Picture, was a massive hit at the Oscars, and this is her kind of returning to a genre that she has kind of mastered with another political thriller here. This time though, we're in 2025. The world has completely changed since we got those films like The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. So I was very fascinated to see how she would approach this genre in a very different way with A House of Dynamite. And I think she manages to pull off a pretty solid film that has you on the edge of your seat, has some very tense moments, and really works. But there are also moments that do let this down quite a bit. And I do have quite a few thoughts about this film. I think the best thing about it is it does enough to incite a conversation. And that's really the best thing you could do in making a film. You don't want to make something that no one gives a fuck about. They watch it and they just dispose of it. I think A House of Dynamite has very interesting ideas by presenting you with a situation and seeing how a bunch of people in different positions would deal with that situation. And you kind of reflect on, well, if this actually happened, something like this would probably be the way that it would all go down in terms of what these people are thinking about. And it feels kind of terrifying in a way when it puts the reflection on the world today and who's in charge of certain countries now and the type of decision that they would make when put into this decision. There's something really horrifying there. And I think that was somewhat what Kathryn Bigelow was going for with this film. It's very subtle the way that she approaches that, and I think the screenplay was pretty fantastic in terms of getting you to have these thoughts without really having any dialogue to speak to that. I believe that the first act of this movie is definitely where it's at its strongest in my eyes, and it stars Rebecca Ferguson playing someone that works in a situation room dealing with potential threats to the United States. And a missile has been fired at the United States, and they're trying to figure out what's going on here and how to potentially stop it. The film gets off to a little bit of a slow start as it's trying to introduce us to these characters and what's kind of going on, and then introducing us to this situation. But there is a key moment in this film where the stress just absolutely heightens and it becomes a very tense thriller from that moment on. It really hooked me, and you just felt the film elevate so much. I think Rebecca Ferguson in her role was utterly fantastic, and it would be great to see her get a supporting actress nomination at the Academy Awards. I really think she was terrific. There was one scene where she's calling her family and then straight away gets off the phone, and her reaction after this call, I think, was a brilliant moment of acting. I really liked that particular moment, but this character really hooks you emotionally. And the fact that she's only in it for about a third of this film, and I'm still reflecting on that character, she definitely had a very lasting impact, and I really loved her performance. She's a focused individual that is strong, but has a great sense of vulnerability and tenderness. And I just think that Kathryn Bigelow as a filmmaker has always put together really strong female characters in her films. And this is no different. I really like this character, and I'd love to see more characters like this on the big screen. The film consistently illustrates to the viewer how stressful it would be to be put in a position to quickly defend the United States from a nuclear missile, the kind of decisions that need to be made in a very short space of time to avoid an absolute catastrophe that could devastate the entire country. Those kinds of stakes make you reflect about your own life and your own job in a weird way, whatever stress that you're having at work is nothing compared to this. And I do not envy the people that are in these particular positions that have to make these decisions if it ever arises. There's another moment I particularly loved in the second act between two countries talking to each other over the phone. The stakes of this conversation, what it represents, and just how tense it all is, I absolutely loved, and it was really well written and very well performed. I don't think there's really a weak performance in this movie, and it does have quite a solid ensemble. You buy into these characters enough. Sure, they're not the most deepest characters, and they don't impact the narrative greatly, as a lot of them are just in their own little acts, with some permeating through it, maybe slightly, and then having more focus later on. But generally, these characters come and go, so they're not given these huge arcs or anything like that. It's more about the situation and what it represents. And I think that's a good thing, that a film like this does put the onus on the viewer to make their own decisions, and there are clear choices in here that make that abundantly clear, that they want you to have your own perspective on things and to really think about this seriously. And those moments, I think, sometimes work and sometimes don't, which I will talk a little bit about. There are some things I am mixed about, particularly the structure. As I said, it's played out in 3 separate acts with different characters, different levels of decision making, and different stakes. However, they are responding to the exact same situation. So when an act ends, it will go right back to the start of this incident and go through that whole decision-making process again with a different set of characters, and it would do the same thing in the third act. Because of that, there is a lot of overlap. There are some scenes that literally are the same thing as before, some moments that are the same thing as before, the same build-up, except it has diminishing returns each act because you know what happened before. And yes, when you start to get new context for certain moments of dialogue or what is going on, that's very clever, and I do like those moments, and I do like the idea of showcasing these different levels of decision making and going through the hierarchy of power and the pressure that consistently grows as you move up that chain. I really like that and what they were going for. But as a movie, as something to be entertaining or interesting, there are moments where I'm like, I've seen this already. Can we move on? Yes, I get it. Move on to the next thing, please, because I don't need to see this 3 or 4 times over as you do. And it's the exact same thing with no new information. Another thing I'm mixed on is the very ending of this movie for a key particular reason. Because I know some people will like it and some people will absolutely hate it, because it feels kind of overwhelming when the movie ends and you're like, that's really it. I feel like the film backs itself into a corner where it can go in 3 different directions, and I don't think any of them would have worked out to be particularly great. This one, as I said, puts the onus on the viewer to make their own interpretations on things. However, the issue I have with it is that it builds up to this moment and you're like, okay, what's going to happen here? It's a very key decision. What is going to happen here? And it asks that question throughout the movie. So you're thinking, this is where this movie is leading to. And the answer that it provides, I found quite disappointing and quite underwhelming. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but you'll know it when you see it. And I think some of you will like it and some of you will absolutely hate it. I'm kind of in the middle of it. Initially, I didn't like it at all. But after having some discussions about it, it is interesting what it's going for. It is bold, and I do like that it encourages a conversation. But I think, once again, as a movie and what it's going for structurally and building something up like that and not quite paying it off in the right way, it is still disappointing. And then this movie just straight up rips off the score from Conclave. I mean, it's the exact same thing. You're not going to convince me otherwise. That score was very distinct in Conclave, And when I hear these same beats playing in a House of Dynamite, it's very distracting, and it just makes me think of Conclave, which I think is a better movie than this. So I didn't like that decision at all. I believe it's the same composer. It's like, come on, dude, you can do something different with this. Overall, I think A House of Dynamite is a solid political thriller. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I think it's filmed quite well. I think it has interesting dialogue. I bought into many of the characters in this film. I think there are very key and distinct moments that I absolutely loved and I want to see more of in films. I think it's so engaging and interesting and has ideas, and that's all I can ask for when watching a film. I don't, however, think this is as strong as Kathryn Bigelow's best films. I don't think it is as good as The Hurt Locker or 0 Dark 30, but it is solid, and when this pops up on Netflix, I do think it's worth the watch. If this is going to be an Oscar player, it's very much on the tail end of things. I don't see this really winning any awards. It could get a nomination here or there. I can think of some things that definitely do stand out that I personally would probably nominate. Rebecca Ferguson is definitely someone like that, where I'm like, she was killer in this movie. And you could say the screenplay as well, for inviting you to have discussions and present interesting ideas. But as I said, that ending was a little bit disappointing. I would borderline say it's a little cowardly. The score is disappointing, and it does get tedious in moments. So it's not a perfect movie, but I do still think it's worth the watch. It's worthy of a recommendation. And if you can see it on the big screen, I think it is worth the watch. And as a score, I'm going to give A House of Dynamite a 3.5 out of 5. I think it is a good movie that is worth your time. And if you do miss this in theaters, definitely check it out when it appears on Netflix. I do think it is perfect for that platform. And those are my thoughts towards A House of Dynamite. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.